Jenny Trinh, who is a financial analyst with the investor relations team at State Street Corporation. She graduated from Boston University in 2018 with a major in finance and management of information systems, and is currently working toward an MBA/MSF dual degree program at Boston College. And she's originally from Vietnam and moved to the US when she was 6 years old. And she's been growing up in Massachusetts since and living in Boston for the last 15 years. So without further ado, please welcome Jenny.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you for the entire Aspire team for inviting me here today. I think that what you guys are doing is very important, and it's great that this is a grassroots effort as well, coming from folks who are in the situation to help others alleviate the struggles of being born a little different from what is considered the majority of Americans. And I think that, especially in times like this with the social pressures of what's happening in the world, it's more important than ever that we do the best we can to empower each other, to develop and unite us together to do, because we all deserve to be living and to be aspiring with dignity and with success. So that was a very long way. I just want to say thank you again for inviting me here today. I think the intro was very well thought of and thorough. So like I said, I'm originally from Vietnam. I speak Vietnamese, Cantonese, and English. And happy to be here today. And thank you so much for everyone else that's joined to listen to me talk for an hour.
All right, thank you for that intro, Jenny. It was really meaningful. So we're going to get started with the Q&A now, and we're going to start off with some rapid fire questions, which are basically just like fun, quick questions, kind of like a warm up, doesn't require too much thinking. So the first question is, what did you eat for breakfast today?
Today I ate this Vietnamese cake that my mom made last night. My mom is really into baking lately, so I just have a whole bunch of those in the fridge that I just heat up.
That sounds really good. So who is the last person you hugged?
That would be my sister last night. We were watching Harry Potter, and I really like Dobby, so I always get a little emotional when he dies.
Yeah, same. So what's the best thing that happened to you this month?
Best thing that happened to me this month, I didn't have school for the entire month, so I got to take my evenings back. I really enjoyed that.
And then what's your favorite type of cake?
Ice cream cake, hands down.
Me too, yeah. And then what's your favorite holiday and why?
Christmas time. I just love Christmas. I know it's cold and it's like brutally, windy, but I think the idea of just celebrating with your family and sitting around and having dinner is just the best thing I can ask for.
Yeah, and then so now we're gonna move on to the actual Q&A portion. So starting off with some information about her immigrant experience. So why did you move from Vietnam to the US?
So my family, my dad was actually having quite a bit of financial difficulties when we were in Vietnam. And then fortunately enough, I have an uncle that lives in Massachusetts, and he was able to do a bit of a sponsorship so that we could get visas to come here. I'm incredibly fortunate. I just remember seeing people, like I think I was like 5 at the time, and I remember going to the embassy and going through rounds and rounds of interviews. Despite what some people like to think, it's actually really, really hard to get an immigration status to come to the US. And I'm sure we were one of the very, very fortunate ones to even make it through. But at a very young age, I recognized that there is a lot of challenges. And I've seen people who spent years and years and efforts trying to get a visa and never got it. And I saw it happen at a very young age. And so I think from there on, I was always very fortunate that I actually got here and to be part of the American community and be able to get an education here. So I cannot be more thankful for that.
Yeah, so what was that transition like from a suburban town to an inner city town?
So when I came to the US, so I lived in the very bustling city in Vietnam, and then coming to the US, I basically kind of like did a 180 flip and went straight to very, very suburban Massachusetts, where everything closes at like 8, 9 p.m. And we were the only Asian family in the vicinity of the town. And I can prove that because literally, like, my mom would walk into school and they wouldn't even have to ask her for my name. They just assume it's me and they would just let her pick me up. And so um, then from there, I spent a few years there. So definitely very assimilated to what I felt was very, very suburban American life. And then having to then move to Boston afterwards was a very big change. It's like another flip 80 as well, because now I actually see that there's more than one Asian person in my school. I'm like, oh wow, there's more of us out there and we exist. And so definitely like a much more diverse group of people that I've met in the city. So it's definitely culturally speaking a very big shift. But also, I guess in terms of how I like the people that I've met as well, it's I feel like in suburban Massachusetts, because of the limited diversity that's out there, unfortunately, they don't like the acknowledgement of other cultures and the acknowledgement of other people and other populations are a bit lower than in inner city where it's very easy. And then there's also the whole economic differences as well. And so we're Massachusetts. I was the only kid in school that had the free lunch coupon that I would have to bring around to get lunch. Whereas in inner city Boston, that one is much more frequent. I can see that happening, and I can meet people from many, many more socioeconomic statuses. So definitely a very different scene between the two, even though they're technically only like 30 minutes away from each other.
Yeah, they're definitely very different. So like, would you say that you prefer the suburban town or the city?
I am, I think, 100% a city person. Um, aside from all of these, all the, more serious, issues of like diversity and culture, I just think in general, the city just has, more options for food, like if I'm hungry at like, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., I can still go outside and there'll still be food available. I mean, granted, we're not New York or LA where, things open a little later than that. But I think in terms of just on a more serious factor, though, I think there are a lot more opportunities here in the city just to meet new people and to be a part of different communities and to see where other people are coming from. I think unfortunately in suburban Massachusetts that exposure is very limited, and because of that you don't get to learn about other people and you don't get to really have a conversation or meet them because all you hear about them is on the news or maybe in the history textbook. Like you don't actually get to face to face with them, which I think is worth a lot more, and that's how you grow relationships.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So what were your early memories about the US?
So early memories of the US, I was like, wow, America really likes to go to sleep really early. But I think I was sort of thrown into the fire a bit coming to the US because in Vietnam, I didn't have any prior English knowledge or education. Like at least like I think I was in like preschool for like a few days. And then so coming to the US, like I didn't even know that the alphabet had 26 letters. I thought it ended at C. And so for the longest time, like I think it was great because I was able to assimilate very quickly and learn English at a faster pace than I would have, I think, if I was in an area where maybe more people spoke Chinese or more people spoke Vietnamese. But I think because of that, though, I kind of internalized a lot of the social challenges and struggles of being a very, very minority person growing up in suburban Massachusetts. A lot of people actually ask me, do I feel like I was bullied? Because I was the only one there and I stand out pretty obviously compared to everyone else. But I think that the problem is that, like, I didn't because I couldn't tell at the time if that was bullying or not because I kind of just didn't really understand what was going on most of the time. I just felt like I needed to fit in, that I needed to laugh if they laughed. I couldn't tell if they were laughing at me or laughing with me for the longest time. And it was not so I never felt like I was bullied. I just felt like I just really needed to make friends and I really need to talk to people and I really need to be part of this. I started desperately trying to cling on to that. And over the years now, I know that, as I grew up, I understand what is tolerable and what is not tolerable. And believe me, some of the things that I remember saying or I remember hearing, I was like, that is definitely not right. But at the time, me, being the only person there, I couldn't tell anyone that I was, if this is right or wrong, because they didn't know either. And so I think in general, though, there's that's why it's so much more important to meet other people so that what is what is right and what is okay and what is not. And because suburban town, unfortunately, is very homogeneous. There's not a lot of create diversity, not just in terms of diversity, but I feel like there's also a lack in diversity of thought as well, because a lot of them grew up together and they grew up with families that have lived next to each other for decades and decades, and like they don't really get to branch out and meet a lot of other people.
And then was there a specific moment or like train of events that led you to realize that you weren't the same ethnicity or the same social class as your peers?
I think, well, the ethnicity part is pretty obvious, right? I'm the only person with black hair and brown eyes. Uh, and in terms of the economic status, I at a very young age, I kind of recognized that very easily. Just the very first moment that I went to school on the first day, and then having to go in line while everyone else, I think, they had to pay for lunch. I still got a little coupon that says it's free lunch, and none of them have actually seen this before, at least not the ones I've talked to. And like at that very moment, and then I was sort of like, wow, we are a little bit different. There was 6 of us in a house, like a 2-bedroom house that's sort of like half an apartment. And so I would go to their birthday parties, or my friends' houses, or even look across the street and they have, like pretty sizable suburban houses. And there's only like 2 or 3 kids. And so I think at a very young age, I understood that I was different, not only ethnically, but socially as well. And that I knew I didn't have the same resources, or the abundance of resources that I would say some of them did have. And I think that only made me strive even further, because I knew that I couldn't let that stop me. Um, and obviously, as you understand, there are a lot of very tangible consequences with, differences in socioeconomic status for a lot of people, unfortunately. But in my mind, I just knew that, okay, so my parents worked this hard to get me here. I know I don't have enough, but that doesn't mean that I just give up and stop here, that I should try my best to get where I can't get. And so like at a very young age, that kind of thinking is already very institutionalized in my brain, and still carries me through to now.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned that you didn't even know English when you got here. So when you had to learn an entirely new language, how did you maintain learning that while not losing your Vietnamese and Cantonese background?
I think that has to. I need to praise my family for that. Uh, I I think in you're thrown into, like, you can learn languages in school, I think, but I think it's very different than living it day to day. You learn much quicker if you're living it day to day and you're forced to talk to people around you. And so but on the other hand, though, my parents who have been I was very young, so it's usually easy. I feel like it's a lot easier to learn a language when you're young than when you're older. And so like it was very easy, and conceptually it made more sense for me to learn English very quickly. But for my parents, though, they were in their late 30s by the time they got here. They were not going to learn English. They couldn't, and the financial situation of family didn't allow them to have an education beyond what they already had, the limited one they had in Vietnam. So in order to communicate with my family, I had to keep going with my Cantonese and my Vietnamese, because if I didn't help them translate, or if I wasn't the one, standing in front of them to interpret things at, the hospital, at the store, at the restaurant, at work, no one else would be able to. And so I think that level of intensity you have to do it every day. It kind of helps to retain it. But I must say though, unfortunately, the past few years, I feel like my Vietnamese have degraded a bit on my end. So I'm definitely trying to work on that to keep that back up.
Yeah, so have you gone back to visit your home country? And if so, what was it like?
I have. I went back twice. The first time was to mark our 10-year anniversary of coming to the U.S. And then the second time was because my grandpa wasn't feeling too well. He had terminal cancer, and so we were going back as family to meet up with basically the rest of the family and say our goodbyes. It was very fun, obviously, to get to meet people again and to get to your family. But unfortunately, I feel like because I was so young when I left, I don't fully remember a lot about Vietnam. And it makes me kind of sad because it's a place that I was born and, I spent a good amount of years there. But it wasn't something that I felt particularly close with. It felt like I was exploring a new city, a new country than going home per se. But regardless though, I think, and and then in terms of meeting the rest of my family, I think prior to like 2010 and up, like before that, it was really hard to connect with them because we're all in different countries. Like I have uncles in Taiwan and aunties in like Canada. It was a lot more expensive to connect them at the time, but now it's easy, right? Now everyone can just go on Facebook and go on like Zoom and just set up a call. But it just felt like I was very distant from my family, well, my extended family for a very long time. But still though, it's good to be able to go back and connect. And Vietnamese food is really good. So for those who haven't had it, I 100% recommend.
Yeah, so now like kind of focusing on that family aspect we kind of brought up. So because you immigrated to the US and had all these new opportunities like learning English and other schooling opportunities, how did you handle the financial responsibility for your family finances?
I think it was more of a I have to do it than oh I would love to do it situation at the time. Unfortunately, I think like as I mentioned, like no one else in my family could speak English or that was able to speak English and be around as often as I'm around the house to help out. And so at a very young age, I knew that that was sort of my responsibility to take up. They because at least I knew some English words. It wasn't even that great at the time. I was probably like 7 or 8 when I started like starting taking over a lot of these things. Like I think a lot of kids in elementary school don't have to worry about like rent payments or like car payments or insurance, and I on the other hand had to spend quite a bit of hours on dictionaries looking up a lot of terms. And so like I negotiated my first lease when I was 10 years old. Not to say that that is in any way an accomplishment because that took a lot of Googling and a lot of like help from dictionaries and other sources. But I think in general though, I never really felt like it was a burden though, because I sort of knew that this is something that I have to do. And now that I'm thinking about it, it is more that I want to do it and I want to be good at it because I felt like this was the way I could repay my parents very little by little for what they've done for me to allow me the opportunities to come here. And then after a while, it just it became so easy to do. after a few years or so, it's kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, no, I'll just read this, translate, and it helps too. It helps me balance between 2 languages, 3 languages as well. So
Yeah, and then did you let your family know about these challenges that you faced? And then like how did you communicate your struggles with your family in general?
So this is a very, very hard question to answer. I think I've always, and not a good way for me to answer it as well, because like a lot of people, I think, especially Asian folks that I know, we're not very good at telling people bad news, or we're not very good at, coming up with very opposing views of things. Like we like to, just go with the flow and be like, oh yeah, that works. And I think, unfortunately, I was very, inept into that mindset of thinking too. Like, I don't want to, wasn't raised to go and talk about my struggles. Wasn't raised to tell people all of my challenges and my internal conflicts and stuff. But I think that that's not actually the way that you should live your life. I think that when you need help, you should ask for it, and all of us have the right to ask for help, and all of us should be able to access the help that we need. And it doesn't make you weak or anything. It doesn't in any way implicate any negative sentiment about you, as it shouldn't, because we're all here to help each other. And so I think after, unfortunately, when I was in suburban Massachusetts, because I was pretty, alone in a lot of things, I had to do a lot of things alone because my friends weren't really able to help me. They didn't understand what I was going through. My family, on their hand, they tried to, not put a lot of burdens on me and try to, encourage me to do the best I can in the way that I want to. But they too, it's really hard to find someone who was going through the same thing as I was going through. So I developed this very independent mindset at a very young age. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do what I can, do the best I can, and then not tell anyone about what's going on with the challenges. And I just, now that I think about it, it's just not right. Like that obviously always try your best and do the best that you can. But, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's totally okay. And, when you ask for it, you don't know what you're going to get. And the worst that anyone can do is say no. Right. And so it's, but you never know if you're going to get something better than a yes, and if it's not just helping, but any relationships after that. And just someone to talk to is another big deal. And I think, so that's why I think these sessions are really important, because I think a lot of people have similar things to say, but just needing someone else to be the voice for them. And I think that is very important. That I appreciate what you guys are doing here, and hopefully more people feel that way, and it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned that like you were the only person in your family that could speak English. So how do you think your immigrant experience was different or the same for your sister?
I think it's fairly different. I was thrown in and had to assimilate. She was born into it, because my sister was born in the US a few years after that we came. So for her, it wasn't so much about learning a new language or having no one in the family to talk to in English, or understanding the language, but more of so that I feel like, because I grew up my journey brought me to this level of independence and this level of responsibility that I have and that I carry forth. But I think, and that I've, fortunately done pretty well. But I think that because I've done that, a lot of people will look at her and say, why can't you do this? Jenny did it. Why can't you did it? She did it at much harder, or much quote unquote harder situations, circumstances than you were. And unfortunately, I think that is another added pressure that I didn't have to deal with because I had no one else to compare it to, because I was the only one. And so, I think, unfortunately, that's something that that my sister has told me that she felt. And so I make a very diligent effort now to make sure that she doesn't feel that way. And, because I don't think it's fair to compare, my experiences with her, just like I would never have to go through certain things that she does, and then vice versa. And so, we all have our experiences. We all should appreciate, from what we learn from it. Bad experience, learn from it. Good experience, feel good about it. And so it's like, it's not comparable to say, oh, you're not doing as well as she is, and because you're doing different things and you're different people. And so I think, it's very important to validate your experiences and give it a voice, because no one knows what you've been through more than you have, and no one knows how you feel more than you have, more than you do. And so very important. So I make it a very diligent effort to make sure that, anything, if I start hearing those comments again, I would just be like, I would stop them and be like, you don't know. And it's not, I mean, I'm not in the most respectful way possible. I would be like, just because she didn't go through the same thing doesn't mean she doesn't have her own challenges, doesn't mean she's not, going through certain things. And it's just unfair to judge that way.
Yeah, and so like kind of having gone through all of your childhood experience, your immigrant experience, what's your relationship with your identity now?
Um, I think I have always been 100% very proud of my identity. I think I didn't acknowledge it before, but I do more and more so every day, because I think about it as, if I grew up the way some of my friends did, in suburban Massachusetts, where, they've had more resources than I have, they've had more, frankly, they had more money than I had, and they had more opportunities than I had. It makes it a little, in my mind, I'm like, oh, so, you have a lot more connections than I do. You make it farther in life. I get it. So it makes it so feel like if I can do the same thing, that I'm validating myself, that I can do more than, and that I can actually break out of this schism that minority folks don't go very far. And so it helps reiterate that in my brain. And I think that, you know, I've never been ashamed to be Asian. In fact, I actually really like that I am. I'm proud of that, because I can stand up tall and say, yes, I didn't grow up the same way, don't have the same resources, but look, here I am. I'm going to the same school you are. I'm working the same job you are. And your family status and your economic status and your minority, unfortunately, like I mentioned, like I know a lot of people in high school and in college who were very smart, very intelligent, but couldn't get to the school that they want to, not because they weren't smart enough, but because they didn't have the resources or the connection to get there and the money to get there, frankly. And so I felt like there was a lot of lost potential there based on the social and economics. So there are very, very changeable consequences of certain economic statuses and socioeconomic statuses. But I also think that if you are offered the opportunity, which I am very fortunately was offered, then you should take the most of it and make the most of it and prove that, you as a human being deserve to live to the full extent and be as successful as you want to be, despite where you're coming from and who you are. I know it's very cliche, but don't limit yourself. Don't underestimate yourself. I think often people do, and I have done it before. I'm very guilty of that. I'm always like, yeah, I don't know if I can, but if you have, I think of it, if you have at least a half a mind of what you think you can do, just go for it, because the worst you can do is fail the other half, and no one's going to blame you anyways. And so I think it's very important that for me, my identity is very important to me. It gives me a voice and value, and it gives me the reason to speak to you guys today, to talk about my experience, and to hopefully encourage those of you to, be a part of this, this movement to try to unite other Asian women around the country.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about how there are a lot of other kids at your high school who didn't get into the schools they wanted to. So sort of focusing on your college experience, what was the process you had to go through to get placed at certain schools?
So that was I had the very, very fortunate help of a local Boston nonprofit called Bottom Line. And they are essentially, they're a college access nonprofit that helps low income students in inner city Boston to search and apply to college, and then apply for financial aid as well. So I literally I thank them all the time. And if you ever hear me talk about anything else, I'm pretty sure I'm thanking them again. So they're pretty tired of it by now. But like if it wasn't for them, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been able to either finish my essay or actually be able to finish it to the point to get into the school that I went to. And I think that is that level of the help that I got from them was immense. You know, they helped me through selecting a school, applying to the school. I didn't know what a FAFSA was. I didn't know what the CSS profile was. I didn't even know what the Common App was. In Vietnam, in college, all you have to do is take a test and then seeing if you get in and if you get placed. Here, it's not the same. It's much more elaborate and it's much more you know, there's a lot of other factors that go into it. Do you play a sport? Do you know, act, blah, blah, blah. And I think, you know, me being the first person in my family to go to high school and then go to college was a huge deal. I was sort of like, yeah, no, I always knew I was going to go. I just didn't know how to get there. And so I was very fortunate to have the help that I got from them. And so I'm very proud of the work that they've done for other people, other folks, you know, kids in high school. But yeah, it was definitely a very big challenge. And honestly, I feel like it just gets harder and harder every year because of the intense competition that's happening. But I do think that, you know, keep fighting for it. I think, you know, even if you don't get to the school that you wanted, I'm sure that, you know, as long as you keep a very open mind, a positive mindset and a very open-minded, you know, mindset going in, I think you can make it the best you can be. I think college was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so what opportunities did you get moving here that you think you would have not gotten otherwise if your family remained in Vietnam?
Well, I think the first and foremost is the education aspect. You know, for all of its challenges and all of its struggles, you know, at least in the US, I get 12 years of education for free. The first 12 years of my education for free. Whereas in Vietnam, every year, you know, it's a different, you know, pay. I would, my parents were struggling to pay for kindergarten, and you can only imagine how more expensive it gets as, you know, as you move along the rest of your economic path. And I think the other thing would be that I don't think I've been able to be able to have this level of responsibility that I internalized and this perspective on the world. Because I think I have a good sense of, you know, how things are in Vietnam versus how things are in the US, and am able to leverage that in a lot of communications that I have and forming relationships with people. And I think, you know, without that, I would have not, you know, got to college. I wouldn't have gotten a job, and I probably, you know, I would probably be having a much harder time if our family definitely would have been more challenged if we were staying in Vietnam, just from an economic perspective. Like here, you know, it's not enough, but there's still like government aid. There's government housing that could help, you know, low income folks through challenges that they need. And so very fortunate there to be a recipient of that, at least for a few years. And so I think there are a lot of like these very actual, you know, benefits of coming to the US and the added benefit of meeting you guys all here today as well.
Yeah, and so sort of focusing more on your career now, could you elaborate more on your job?
Very few times do people actually ask me about my job, so I appreciate that. So I am a financial analyst. I work in the investor relations team in at State Street Corporation. So I guess I can talk to you about my not very not very lengthy career. I'm only 25 years old, so I only made it so far. And so I graduated from college, and then during senior year, I was able to get a call from State Street to say that I will participate in their 2-year rotational program. It's a rotational development program. For those of you who don't know what that is, essentially it's like a 2-year program where you are a full-time member, you're a full-time staff, you get all the full-time benefits that you want. But within it, you get 4 different rotations, so each 6 months, where you can go through 4 different teams, and then kind of the goal is that you know, at each of them you learn about the company, you learn about the industry, and at the end of it you should be able to figure out which ones you like and which ones you don't like, or which ones you want to explore more, right? And so that will be then your permanent placement. So I did, you know, IR, short for investor relations, in one of my rotations. I personally, going into IR, I thought I would hate it, and I thought it would just be 6 months. I was literally counting down the days. But then I realized that I liked it way more than I ever expected I would. And so I rejoined the team as a permanent member last year. And for those of you who don't know what investor relations does, don't worry, because I didn't either 2 years ago. And they are sort of the middle. I call us the middleman between senior management, so the CEO, CFO of State Street, versus the investors, and the analysts for State Street. And so, you know, we do a lot of communications. It's a lot of, it's a good balance of things, actually. It's like, it's good that you are getting exposure to the numbers and the details, but also it's a lot of about communicating. How do we communicate to investors? How do we communicate to analysts? How do we talk about what's going on? How do we gauge what investors are thinking of us? And I think it's one of the few roles in the company where you can actually see a very tangible impact on the stock price. So like if something, you know, if some things happen and some things happen at a conference that we go to, or something happens at a earnings release that we go to, it's you can see, sometimes you can see a very tangible impact to the stock price. So it's very technical talk that I just went through. Personally, though, I think that IR has given me a very good forum to develop myself professionally, learning different skills, learning very technical skills, relationships, management skills. But also, I think IR has given me exposure to people, and teams and things that I don't think a 25-year-old would, at least, you know, in the banking industry, which unfortunately is still quite hierarchical. So like, you know, I've been on calls in direct contact with the CEO and the CFO for, you know, pretty often, like many times, which I think a lot of people my age probably wouldn't have had the chance to do. So, and I think there's also the idea that in IR, I learned to be more confident in myself and the way that I do things. And my team's very supportive of me. And over the years, I think I've learned to be more confident in my decisions and my analysis and my work, to say that, you know, hey, you know, I used to be the person who, you know, I'm trying to get everything right and getting everything. So like if my manager said, change this, I would not think twice and actually change it. But here it's like, I think about it and I go, you know, I take a step back and go, does this really make sense? And I challenge the idea. And I think now this has to, you know, this requires a very unique culture in your team to accept that kind of challenging. And I'm very fortunate to be part of that. And so, you know, it builds my own confidence in myself, and the integrity of my work and the quality of my work. And it helps me, you know, present myself better and be a more valuable candidate, and to go, you know, maybe somewhere else later on in life. And I think it's very important. It's very empowering. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun place to be. It's never boring, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and so sounds like you do a lot of work. So how do you keep yourself motivated throughout all that work and through your dual MSF and MBA?
Well, the paycheck does a lot to you. It's a good motivator. But aside from that, though, in all seriousness, I think the thing that keeps me most motivated is that I have this. I've always had this desire, I guess, this drive to be. I never wanted to be the best, because I always feel like being the best is a very dangerous term, and it can lead to a lot of potentially lead to a bit of a negative thinking. And in my end, I think that, you know, I like to be above average. Or, you know, I like to be competitive, and I don't like to be the best at everything, because I think there are a lot of pressures of being the best and a lot of challenges that come with it. But I think that, but that's not to say to discourage anyone, and I'm not discouraging anyone to be the best. But I think you should be you know, you strive to be a better version of yourself, the best you can be today versus, you know, there should be the best that you would be 2 years ago. And you, and so, you know, all the things that I've been doing, going to work, going to grad school, is really just a way for me to, you know, sort of prove to myself that I can do it and that I'm already on track to do it. And so secretly, selfishly, it's really, you know, to for me to check a box and say, yep, did it. But also, I know, you know, that I mentioned in seriousness, though, the paycheck matters, because my family has sacrificed a lot for me to get here and for us to get here. And so it's, in my way, I feel like it's sort of my responsibility to, you know, do the best I can, get a job, and then we pay them back, you know, so that we can finally maybe own a house instead of renting one, or pay for my kid, my sister to go to college. And so I think I've been very motivated at a very young age, because I knew that I grew up in a different circumstance than some of my peers, who have trust funds and have a house that they can go to. And so, you know, in my mind at a very young age, that's been, you know, pretty much like hounded in me that this is what I want to do and this is what I could do. And it, that's been driving me so far today. And that's not to say that, like, when I say hounding, I mean, like, I don't mean like I'm like constantly struggling and like trying to strangle myself to do it. I actually want to do this. Like, I want to be better at myself, and I want to be a better form of myself, and I want to take on this responsibility because I actually think that it is important that we do this this way. It's not pressuring, and I definitely don't want that to, you know, feel like that for anyone, that you have to repay your parents. But I think in my case, though, I enjoy doing it, and I think that the side benefits also, because I'm improving myself and that I make myself a better candidate. And I think that you should be happy for what you do, and this makes me happy, and this is my drive. And I think I don't need a $500 million house, but I think I need to but I think everyone should strive to be the best the way they can and be comfortable in where they are, and who they want to be. And so that's been where that's sort of my drive in life. And I think it's important for you to sort of balance, you know, what is it that you want versus what is it that people want from you. And you know, only then can you decide and determine, you know, what is it that you really care about.
Yeah, and so since you're only 25 and relatively early in your career path, where do you envision yourself in the next few years?
Not at a bank. I would like to not work in a bank in 5 years. I think only because I think I think it's kind of funny though. I think in business school, which is where I went in college, everyone wants to work at an investment bank. Everyone wants to work at a trading floor. Everyone wants to work, you know, at any of the financial companies, the asset managers, blah, blah, blah. No one ever talks about working at a nonprofit in finance. And I think that's really sad, because that's where, in my experience, they need the most help and they need the most, you know, talent. But it's not talked about, because obviously there are other components to it. There's the reputational component, there's the economical component to it. But I hope that maybe far down the road, a little further down the road, I would be able to, in a place where I can then transfer all the knowledge. And I not to say banks suck and anything, I don't feel that way. But I just think that there are a lot of people that could work at a bank. And I think a lot of very, very smart, very, very capable talent in the big industry and in the financial services industry, that I think I can move from and work in a nonprofit, because then I can use my knowledge of finance and accounting to help, nonprofits, because I think those are the ones that need my help the most, and I can create the most impact there. So very far down the line, but I would like to be able to work in the social sector.
Yeah, so kind of like looking from the bigger picture now, how did your upbringing define the characteristics about who you are today?
Um, I think because of how I was brought up, I think I knew at a very early age that you don't take things for granted, because a lot of things happen to get me here. And, by growing up from folks that are different from me, I became very protective of me and protective of my family and very independent. I've sort of morphed myself into this attitude where, I don't need anyone's help. I can do this myself. I can strive. I can be the best. And after a while, unfortunately, I felt pretty lonely after a while, because it just feels like no one else understood what I was doing, how, the struggles that I have. And so that's all the more reason to talk about it, and because there are other people going through with you, and you just have to be able to open yourself to this vulnerability, to talk to people and communicate to people about this. And I think that on a more, broader level, I think a lot of people who were born into a certain socioeconomic status don't recognize what they have and what they can do with it. When you're born without it, it's very easy to tell. It's very obvious. And I think that that's why, for those who have the opportunity to rise above, what quote unquote their ranks, to be comparable and to be, on par with others and ones that have been more fortunate. I think it's our responsibility to then make allow for a platform to empower others like us to rise as well, because I think the world doesn't need competing forces. We've had enough of that. I think it's more important for you to understand what you have and what you don't have, what truly would just make you happy, and be the best form of yourself that you can be.
Yeah, so looking back on our entire Q&A, it sounds like you've had a really eventful life. You faced a lot of challenges. So kind of to wrap up this Q&A, how do you maintain your outgoing and confident personality given the challenges you faced?
I think I'm like 80% a genuinely happy person, and I think I like to be happy. And I think that even when I'm going through challenges, I like to think about the positive things out there, because I always like to think of it that there are worse things that can happen, and if I'm not there yet, then I still have a chance to bring things back on track. And I think because I understood from a very young age all the challenges and all the misfortunes that happen in society, because I've experienced some of them, not all, definitely. There are definitely much more, ones that I fortunately have not had to deal with. And but I think recognizing that and having that perspective on life, I'm aware of a lot of things that are going on, and and that just refortifies my concept of not taking things for granted. And it gives me also a good look on, there are two sides to every story. You can look at it in a very sad way or a very negative way, or you can say, yes, it's bad. Yes, and don't discredit the bad, by the way. Take it all in and go. But I like to take it all in and then go, yes, these are all terrible things, but there's one slither of hope in there. And I think I always like to be able to say, let's take that slither of hope and turn it into reality as much as I can. And I think that mindset, I'm definitely a half glass full person. And I think just in general, when I'm happier, I'm more positive around people who have more positive, encouraged energy, it just feels like life is not as challenging. And I think life is very valuable, and that you shouldn't go through life miserable and sad all the time. So I try to do that. And so if you some of my friends think I'm overly optimistic. They call me the Obama of our group. And so I think it's true though. I think though, obviously there are challenges and there are difficulties, but I think if you keep an open mindset and a positive attitude, not everything is, the sky falling down, and the one, and I think things will work out the way they would. And I think it's important to smile and have a good day.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, finally, we're just going to end off with a few more rapid fire
Oh,
questions. So, the first one is, what is your favorite pasta?
I love spaghetti and I love the way my mom makes it. I don't know how she does it, but it's good.
And then, if you could describe your mood right now with a color, what would it be and why?
I think it's green. And I think only because I'm looking at my keyboard was green. And I think green is a good color, it's life, it's energy, it's optimism, everything that I think I should be. And I feel most energized by it. I think that's where I am right now.
What kind of phone do you have?
I have the oldest phone in my family. I have the iPhone 7. And it's but it's good though, because now I don't feel bad about dropping it anymore. Just playing it around the bed.
And what's your favorite season and why?
I'm a big fall person, because I don't have to wear thick jackets. And if you know Boston winter, it's pretty brutal. So I don't have to do that. It's not too hot that I have to, like burn in the sun at 95 degrees, 100 degrees weather. So it's like the perfect hoodie plaid weather, which is basically what I wear every day when I'm not at
Yeah,
work.
I love fall too. And then, what are you looking forward to within the next week?
Uh, I'm actually going to New York this weekend, so I'm very excited about that. And I think because after that it's going to be a busy season again back at work, so I'm going to take the best I can in the next few days to enjoy that and enjoy time with my family.
Nice. All right. So now we just have a few major takeaways that Jenny would like to share with you all to wrap up the workshop.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest note that I wanted everyone to be aware of, that I think are the biggest points, is that your experiences serve a voice. Your experiences are not unilateral. They are not homogeneous. They are unique to you, and they make you who you are. And therefore, you shouldn't let it. You shouldn't let it define you, but you should build up on it, and you should say, I deserve a voice because this is where I am. This is what I'm thinking of. And I think with what's happening in the world right now, I think we're very aware of the systematic racism, and that's happening in our society and happening in all of our infrastructure. So I know a lot of companies are doing and then a lot of places are doing a lot of diversity inclusion things. But I always like to think of it as, diversity gets us through the door, but there's still a huge distance for us to get to the table, which is where all the decisions actually matter. And I think it's up to us as a community, and this is why it's so important to have Aspire, groups like Aspire, to encourage people to inch themselves towards the door, towards the table. I'm sorry, and these conversations are worth having, and and I'm very and it's very valuable to me, that I think that I can be a part of it. So huge thank you to you guys for that. And then I wanted to end the night with a bit of optimism from Disney. I'm a big Disney fan, for those who know me. And I love Ratatouille, by the way, great movie. And so I don't think that, I mentioned over and over again, I don't think your experiences um, are unilateral. They definitely are, yours. But I also don't think that you should limit yourself based on your experiences, based on where you come from, because you never know who would be the next person that you meet, the next relationship that you build. So there are always opportunities out there to improve and to try to be better. So wanted to end on a more positive note for all of us as we head into summer, and then for the rest of you guys a more enjoyable rest of the year.
All right, thank you so much, Jenny, for taking the time to join us for an inspiring talk. So tonight, Jenny led us through her life journey and her childhood growing up without diversity. And I hope you all gained insightful advice on how to navigate the immigrant experience and its effect on your career and life. So with that, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. And my contact info is right there as well, and happy to share with as well if anyone wants to connect to me offline. If you're not bored of me yet, me talking, I'm happy to be of any resource or help as many ways I can. And once again, thank you, Aspire, and thank you, Rachel, so much for monitoring this talk. I hope that was a valuable event for us. If I wasn't just babbling on for too long. And so I just want to reiterate, I do think what you guys are doing are very important, and that I am happy and very honored to be a part of it.